Welcome to Social Butterfly, the program that will bring the most amazing media industry guests to give us insight to the media industry. I'm your host, Dion.
And I'm Clara.
And today, we would like to introduce our special guest, BBC radio host, Phil Upton.
Hello, both.
So in this episode, we will host our last guest to talk about your study, your professional experiences, and your point of view about the media industry. We will explore the impressive field career throughout your experience in radio and in journalism. And we are really fortunate to have such an experienced and successful person to talk to. So thank you for coming, Phil. So we are today in a student and media platform. So let's talk about the importance of education that add on your career development. So we know that you choose to study at Birmingham University.
Indeed.
But we are studying here in Coventry, media and communication. So how do you choose to go there and not here in Coventry?
I was born in Birmingham, and it is actually one of my, not life regrets so much, but I decided to stay home for university and not travel away. And I think had I travelled away and made that break at that time, like many of you, have done, to come to Coventry, and hopefully, by the way, we're treating you well here and you're having a good time in Coventry. I chose to stay home and go to my hometown university, and I had one specific reason for that in mind, because the course I went on at what is now UCB or BCU, I don't know, they change the letters every 5 years, gave you 3 weeks work experience in the industry. And I knew where I was going to go for those 3 weeks work experience. A lot of the guys on the course wanted to do newspaper journalism, and they went off and did their 3 weeks in newspapers. I wanted to go and do my 3 weeks at local commercial radio station BRMB, which is now free radio, now about to become Hits radio. Yeah, that was it. So in Easter of 1987, I took my 3 weeks work experience at BRMB and stayed there for 11 years. So that course, without that course and without that entrance and without that door that it opened, who knows?
Wow. And leading on from that, we want to know what sparked your first interest in radio.
Okay. It's a good question. It's a really good question. He gathers, and yeah, I think, and you'll all recognise this, there'll be certain points in life when you cease to be a child and other things become more interesting to you. So for me, that was definitely finding music, and as a result of finding music, it was finding radio that played music. So I'd very quickly get into listen to Radio 1, and then I'd understand how the music went round on Radio 1. I'd then listen to the DJs, and I would really like the DJs on Radio 1. And then as a point of doing that, I then go up and down the dial and find these other radio stations. Wow, okay. And found West Midlands, Birmingham-based radio stations. So from that, I was then able to go, all right, so I can actually do this here. I don't have to go to London to go and do that. So that gave me the initial idea. And then, yeah, I started club DJing actually, first of all. So I was a house music DJ back in, just as house music was breaking through, 1987, 1988. And that's really the specialty that I brought to my radio, was the fact that I also had a bit of knowledge about this area of specialist music, this genre over here that was breaking through. So yeah, that also got me a foot in the door.
Okay, so many things push you to this industry. Yeah, perfect. But we are really curious to see the real working life, and as almost graduate students, we want to know what piece of advice you can give us if we were interested to work in this industry.
Sure. I think the thing I'd say to you and everybody, watching and listening to this, is exactly what was told to me at the time, and it's really timely we're talking about this. We've just seen the passing of a radio legend in the last few weeks, a guy called Steve Wright, who was on Radio 2 for years, and I listened to as a kid on Radio 1, and I went to a Radio 1 roadshow as a snotty-nosed 16-year-old at the NEC in Birmingham, and Steve Wright was hosting the Radio 1 Roadshow, and I sort of fought to get to the front to get his autograph, and I said, "What advice would you give to, I've just started hospital radio. What advice would you give?" And he said, "It's great that you've started on hospital radio." He said, "because the only way from there is down." And he just, and his thing was just keep going. Never give up. Make your demo tapes. Submit your demo tapes. Submit those. Become a nose, a pain. Be constantly knocking on the door until you get that break and that opportunity. So that's what I'd say to you: is be tenacious. Be resilient. This is a great process for you and a great time in life. You'll get knockbacks. You'll apply for things that you won't get, and they will prepare you and skill you for whatever it is you choose to do in life and make you resilient, because you won't find success. You won't get a yes straight away. If you do, you're incredibly lucky, but you won't get a yes straight away. So if you get a no first time, second time, fifth time, don't call it off then, because the 10th, 11th, 12th time, the next time could be your time.
The time.
Yeah.
Wow. I think that's very inspirational, especially for most of us that are looking for placements or soon to graduate anyway. But since we focus on a brief history of your education background, we now want to dive deeper into your radio career. So obviously we are aware that you've worked for multiple different radio stations over your years.
Sacked from a few.
But what made you transition to work for BBC Radio?
Okay, another good question. And again, those of you who will have studied radio and will have studied formatics will be very familiar with the difference between music-led format radio and speech-led radio. So two very distinct and different propositions for audiences. Music-led radio tends to be younger-based, speech-based radio tends to be older-based. I'd played house music for years, been on a top 40 radio station that was #1 in the marketplace in Birmingham. Then moved to, you'll all be familiar with the Heart brand, so I did 5 years on the Heart brand. And that as a format actually is very, I'm going to use the word restrictive, because you only spoke 4 or 5 times an hour, each time for a minute or 30 seconds even. And if you did sort of 3 hours of that every day or 4 hours of that every day, it was formatically, I mean, it worked. The audience loved it. The audience piled in for it. But it was very restrictive as to your growth as a broadcaster. And I'd also made the decision around my mid-30s to go, if I'm going to make this work for life, if I'm going to hopefully keep this going until I'm in my 50s or even retire, I'm not going to be the hip hop cool jock for the rest of my life. I need to find a way of extending my skills and transitioning to speech radio. So I used to listen to a lot of speech radio. I had interests in politics and news and current affairs, and that meant I was able to speak about some of those issues fluidly, hopefully with some sense, and that meant that when the time came to approach the BBC, as it turned out they approached me, which is convenient, then that was the time to make the move.
Wow.
Okay. So you were really curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's there's a lot of things that will happen by accident in life, but there'll be a lot of things that will be of your making. And if you are, and I've again been very lucky, and I'm grateful for that, in control of most of those events. I've always viewed my career as 5-year blocks. So the question I'm always asking myself, and you should be asking yourself, is what am I doing now that gets me to where I want to be in 5 years from now? And I ask myself that question at 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 50, etc. Right? Okay.
Perfect. So obviously, as you said, you've worked for different stations and Heart being very restrictive. What has been the most serious topic you've had to cover on a radio show?
The death of a monarch. It doesn't come much bigger than that. So to be on air when that news breaks, to have to broadcast that to your audience who are aware, I don't know if you recall the circumstances around it in 2022, that something was definitely afoot. We kind of knew by that afternoon something was happening. They'd sort of curtailed events in the Houses of Parliament that day. and yeah, by tea time, we knew. So to have to go on air, and again, at this point, again, you'll be very familiar, those of you who are studying this, all broadcast media strips back what it does in its output, so all the jingles and the songs and certainly advertising all goes, and you have to come on air, just yourself, sit and explain to the audience what's happening, why it's happening, and be their companion through much of this, and verbally hold their hand and say, might be feeling a bit tough about this at the moment, or this, whatever your opinion, pro or anti royalty, this is a huge moment in history. It's time, it's important that we recognise that and pay respect towards that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was an event, like a worldwide event.
Yeah.
In fact, and it was interesting to know how you manage it. But now we have a question.
September the 11th, a similar one.
Yeah.
I was at home. I was actually on air the moment the first plane crashed into the first tower. So I was on heart. I was doing 10 till 2. And those of you who know your facts about September the 11th will know that the first plane crashed into the first tower at roughly 8:45, 8:48 that day, which of course here was 1:48 in the afternoon. So I'm coming to the end of my show when suddenly all the news channels break to a smoking tower in New York and the World Trade Center's on fire. That's all we knew at that point. Oh, blimey, all right. So my first link at 10 to 2 would have been some breaking news. The World Trade Center's on fire at the moment. We'll have more in the next bulletin at 2 o'clock coming up in the next 10 minutes. By the time we got to 2 o'clock, it's clear that that fire has been created by a plane. And the 2 o'clock news is on. And again, for those of you who know your events, it was 9:01, so 2:01 UK time, when the second plane hit the second tower. So in the 2 o'clock news, we're all in the same studio. The newsreader sat there. Me and the next presenter are swapping seats whilst the 2 o'clock news is on, ready for him to start. And the newsreader has just read out, and all planes in America are now being grounded. As the second plane hits the second tower, I shout, "Not that one!" And it comes into the second tower. And of course we all knew then at that point, this wasn't an accident. This was something that had been planned, and America was under attack, and history, as we know, then took us from there. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, you were on here at this time, and no, it's not easy to manage it, but I'm sure you
and
did
again,
well.
it comes back to that thing. You then have to turn up the next day and broadcast the next day, and by now all the music's softer. Okay, everything's stripped back again. I was on heart, there were no adverts, there were no jingles. And of course, what that does as a broadcaster is, now I've got a built experience, which I'm now prepared for, and I've got that experience. So hence, when the monarch dies, I'm equipped and I'm ready because I did that back then. And yeah, hopefully, we did a good job.
Yeah, so you were really experienced at this time. And so it was about event, but more now about celebrities, which is the most famous you interview. Someone you really like.
Well, there's people you interview and get on well with, and you have a rapport with, and there's people who you brush shoulders with. There's people, I met Michael Jackson, okay, when he was alive. So one of my roles was to play new music on the radio station. The record company that put his music out at the time was CBS Sony Music. I was invited down to London to swanky hotel where Michael Jackson's Dangerous album was being launched. I've still got the invite. The invite was a gold-plated thing, Dangerous album launch, Parks Lane Hotel, whatever. And there were only 100 of these, and mine's numbered 96 in the corner, so I've still got that. Very important piece of memorabilia. And we're there. We all have to listen to the Michael album, obviously, and pay it respect because the record company's hoping you're going to play it all when you get back to your radio stations. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Jackson. And then Michael Jackson's brought round the room, right? He's literally whisked around the room and he's introduced to you. And you go, "Michael Jackson, this is Michael, this is Phil from BR&B in Birmingham." And I go, "Thank you, Michael, for your album." And So Michael Jackson said to me, "Thank God," and then walked off in another direction and met the next person. So,
Wow.
It's quite
but
amazing.
you know, that's an icon, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, bumping into Muhammad Ali at the Brit Awards. Okay, so it's 1999. It's the end of the century. The BBC at Sports Personality of the Year have decided to do Sports Personality of the Century. So Muhammad Ali has been flown in for Sports Personality of the Century. I'm off to the Brit Awards. I'm outside my hotel in London, ready for a cab to take me to the Brit Awards at the XL Centre in London. Suddenly, the crowds part, waiting for the taxi, and Muhammad Ali and two of his entourage bring him down towards a taxi. And you'll know, obviously, he suffered from Parkinson's for quite a lot in his life, but his eyes were incredibly alert. And I managed to bumble out in a Brummie accent, "You're the greatest!" And he sort of smiled and nodded and got in his car and was taken off to the 1999 Brit Awards. So, you know, you get to meet these global people, but they aren't the people that impress you the most. The people that impress you the most are the people that have given up their time to look after a dying loved one. The people who you meet are the people you interview on a much more earthly basis, who give up, contribute, make a difference every day, and that's the people you sort of who resonate with you and are left with you, because after those conversations you are left feeling, wow.
Writers have the Literature Nobel Prize, the actor in the United States has the Oscar, but what is the most sought after awards in your field?
Okay, so there are two set of awards. A bit like any acting award, you have the Oscars and the Foreign Press Awards and the season, don't you, for that. We have something called the ARIAs, which is Audio Radio Industry. Don't ask me what it stands for. It used to be called the Sony Awards, and I've been very lucky to win one of those in the past. And then there's something within the BBC called the Frank Gillard Awards, and those awards are specifically for local radio, and again I've been lucky enough to work on radio stations where we've won awards for that. So yeah, so the ARIAs / Gillards would be the two Oscars of the radio industry.
Okay, it's interesting.
It is. It's very impressive to hear about that, because obviously not many people know much about radio and what actually goes behind it and what kind of awards are available.
Yeah.
So it's really insightful. And also you've been in the industry for around about 25 years.
Probably a bit longer than that actually, but who's counting? Yeah. That's very kind, thank you. Only 25 years.
But we want to know how much has changed in radio since you first started.
Huge. And again, you will appreciate this. Your ability to sort of flex between radio, online and digi now will be what defines your career. It won't necessarily be about just the output of your 3-4 hour radio show. It will be your ability also to create content that lives on digi formats beyond your program, before your program and after your program. So we're mandated at the moment now. Every story we cover on BBC Local Radio has to have a digital footprint. So either that, we're running some items at the moment about the 40th anniversary of the miners' strike. So 1984 was this huge industrial dispute between the miners and the then Thatcher government. It's the 40th anniversary of that. Coventry and Warwickshire coalfields were very much in the middle of that. So I got to interview two people who were at the heart of that yesterday. What's the one thing the team wanted more than anything else in that? Don't forget to take a photo with them, Phil, for online after you've done the interview. So when the interviews and they close the microphones, you've then got to go and have a photo taken. That will then live on the social, as a slide on the Twitter feed and the social media channels. So in terms of the way you have to think about a broadcast career, and we're talking broadcast and audio here as well, you cannot just confine yourself to just the radio anymore.
Okay, so you give a lot of details on the change, but now we said we don't count, but you are in this industry for a long time, and how do you do to still passionate and have the motivation, and what are the keys to be successful and have a long and successful career? Like you said that you need to have opportunities, but what other thing you can say about this?
No, it's a good question. And it is very hard. When you've been in any job for any length of time, it's natural that you may get a bit stale, it gets a bit samey. And again, the one piece of advice I'd give to anybody doing anything, and I have a son who is 22 and a daughter who's 19 who are both on this pathway themselves. My daughter is much more academic than my son, so she's currently in a process where she's looking at courses and unis. So, and my words to them would be to anybody is do what you love, you know, because there's no point doing a job you don't like because the salary's great or the money's good or the package that comes with it is, unless you enjoy the job, which you've got to give minimum 8 hours a day towards, you're not going to get it. It's not going to be fulfilling. You'll end up resenting it and not liking the people you're working with, the place you're working at, and your whole, you know, mental health now. People are much more aware of that than they ever were. That's going to have a damaging effect on your mental health long term. You're in a building you enjoy with the people you like. You've got a shared interest and a shared outcome, which in our case is to make great radio every day. That in itself will drive you on. If you're surrounded by those people because they all love what you're doing and you love what they're doing because we're all in this together, then that will keep you going. Also, career longevity defines that at some point you have to refresh yourself.
Yeah.
Like I said, I couldn't still be on the air on a top 40 radio station now because there'd be somebody better than me, younger than me, slicker than me who'd be able to do that. So you redefine yourself, speech broadcaster, whatever that might be, and that in itself then refreshes you and suddenly you're off again. I call it resetting the career clock. You put your career clock back to 0 and then off you go again. So I've gone from drive time shows to breakfast shows to morning shows to afternoons, back to breakfast shows. And every time you do that, there's another refreshing of your career, which keeps you fresh and passionate.
That's perfect. I think that's very inspirational because obviously most people are very known to stay with one job or 2 jobs over their whole lifetime of their career. But I think, especially for the generation now, it's very important that we do these refreshers.
Yeah. But you will have 3, 4, 5 different jobs. You may choose a career now which you end up completely changing. You know, by the time you're 25 or 30, God, to be 25 and 30 again. I mean, you know, I'm saying to my daughter now, she's on an apprenticeship. She doesn't like it. Her mates are all at uni and having a good time. And by 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night, she wants to be in bed and they're all out partying. She's now going, oh, what have I done? I'm going, look, you're 19. Right now, there's no such thing as a bad decision. You know, you can make another decision at 25, and I promise you, even at 25, it's not too late to do something else. And you're 19. You've got another 6 more years yet. So, you know, right now, you may change what you're doing. You may love this. This may spark something for you, which is, I have to do this. Okay, this is what I'm meant to do. I was lucky enough. That's what happened to me. You know I am meant to do this. You will find, I promise you will find that for you.
That's amazing. As you've been on the radio for a long time, we want to know, do you have to work with such different dialects, such as the Queen's English, and have you ever made a mistake live?
Oh, God. Every morning when you're listening. Yeah, I mean, dialects and certainly becoming more globalised and the nature of news now means that obviously we're not confined to just doing the UK news. World news, world events means you are honour bound to cover war in Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, okay? And with that comes different accents and different dialects. I've been lucky enough to travel a bit. We were just talking before we came on about the fact I'm a huge follower, a huge fan of France and the Tour de France, and I've cycled through France quite a lot. So you pick up a better language, you understand the different dialects. I come from Birmingham. I mean, it's the most unpopular accent there is in the UK, so I'm familiar with that. But yes, there is a tolerance that I think most people now accept. That means you don't have to come on air and go, hello, this is the BBC, as it would have done back in the 1920s. You know, because the BBC's keen not to be like that, because it thinks then, well, we're removed from regular normal people. So the BBC actually appreciate, you know, if you're broadcasting on Birmingham or in Coventry, then actually some people who are from Birmingham and Coventry would be good on that radio station, and they're going to speak like the audience they serve. So that's actually now a plus, not a minus.
Okay, and on set you have all the team around you, and are you trusting your team?
Yeah.
Is it okay to follow the script? And
that's a good question, because I've recently done 2 training modules. So the BBC are very keen that our skill sets are constantly refreshed. I was only in one on Monday. We've got a general election coming up this year, and they thought it'd be a really good idea for its presenters to get a day out to look at hold to account interviewing techniques. So we had a day's training on hold to account interviewing with an election coming up. And one of the things that came out of that was a word, trust. Okay, you have to trust your producer has to trust you, and that relationship, producer to presenter, is pivotal. It's almost symbiotic thing. I'm very fortunate. I have a producer, I will think something and she will say it in my ear, and I'll go, I was just thinking we should be doing that now, okay? Or I'll say something, she'll go, it's all right, I've already done it. So wouldn't it be good if we clipped the guest we had at 7 o'clock and we turned that round before the, it's all right, I've done it, okay? Wow, all right, okay. And if you've got that relationship, which you only get with time, and you only get by putting in that investment in each other, then yeah, so in your careers, trusting the staff, the team around you, you know, my name's over the breakfast show, it's the Phil Upton breakfast show, but I tell you something, if I didn't have Hannah on the news and Jenna on production and Debbie in the back and Richard out on the radio car, I say to them all the time, we're a team dynamic, it's a team dynamic. And I say, if you've got a problem, by the way, with anybody else, come to me, because I'll kill for you, all right? And we have all stood up for each other. The BBC's gone through a lot of change in local radio, and we've all fought for each other and the roles we've got, and we have, thankfully, largely remained intact when there's been a huge amount of churn and change in local radio. And I think that's because we've got that ethic between us, you know?
Oh, it's good answer, because we are working in team, but sometimes it's hard, but we manage to do it.
Well, okay, so let's turn that on its head. Yes, in any environment, there will always be people you may not like or you may not get on with, but understanding that you are going to become a professional, either in this task or another, in this career or another, you may not get on with everybody, but your professional head has to be on all the time and rising to that and putting aside any personal feeling you may have for an individual or an argument you may have. Bring it back all the time, okay? What do we need to do to get the best program, the best interview, the best whatever it might be? Okay, so as professionals, what can we do to ensure that? Put aside anything you may have, likes or not likes, will again define how long you stay in this job for, I think, you know?
I think it's time to now focus on your professional history. Since we've focused so much on the industry, we now want to look at what moment has been very particular to you from all the different radio shows. What one has stood out most to you? Because obviously you said Heart, very restricting, but now BBC, you have your own show, The Breakfast Morning. What has stood out for you in your journey?
Again, the things that stand out aren't necessarily the 9/11 moments, and yes, the death of a monarch is probably the biggest thing I'll probably ever get to report on, probably. But we did a thing when I was at BBC WM in Birmingham, where just after austerity, 2008, 2009, we've been asked to team up with a children's hospital in Birmingham who needed a new new unit for kids to have kidney transplants. And the unit was going to cost £1.5 million. And they said, well, look, you know, obviously we don't expect you to come up with all of that money, or your listeners to, but, you know, we can match fund anything you raise. So we went to our audience, explained this, and as part of that, we did features. We did the breakfast show live from the kids unit. We followed kids' stories. Some of these kids had to come in 3 times a week to have their kidneys cleaned out, and horrible process, hugely time consuming for their parents and for them. So 3 days of their life every week to come in and have this renal work done. And the Kidney Kids unit, the new unit, would strip away a lot of that, would strip away a lot of the need for that. Kids could have dialysis at home rather than there. They could take away this kit, this modern kit, to do all that. So we turned around to the audience and went, look, you're going to make so many children's lives so much better if we can do this. You know, can you host a raffle? Can you do a sponsored silence at your school? Whatever it is, they raised £1.5 million over a 15-month period. That's £100,000 a month, every month, for 15 months during austerity. And that actually is the thing that sticks with you. And you go, yeah. And when you went to the opening of that and they cut the ribbon that morning, the Kidney Kids unit, we did that. You know, that's a good day at work.
Yeah.
That's a good day at work.
It is.
Big goal, big goal. And is there a particular recognition? But you have been the title of the most recognizable voice in the Midlands. So how do you feel about this?
I'm not sure whether that's true, but that's very kind and flattering of you to say that. I'm sure there are other people much more worthy of that title. You only get that, or get to be included in that, by having some kind of career span, and that career span again comes back to a lot of these things we spoke about already. So I'm very fortunate, very grateful, and very lucky to have had all of that, because that's the only way you become recognised. You know, horrible, but yeah.
Perfect. So we do want to discuss another topic. Obviously, you had your hobbies of DJing, but there's one thing that particularly stood out to us. We saw that you did a bit of modelling.
Oh man. Okay.
So we kind of want to know what got you into it in the first place, and was it useful for you when you did your hosting?
Oh God. Yeah, I was advised to do this. Someone said to me, "You'd be really good." So I went for a couple of tryout sessions, not really expecting anything to come from that. Then, you know, a few days later, I got a call. An agency signs you up. Out of that comes a couple of jobs. I've really not pursued it. I'm not on the phone trying to get gigs and modelling assignments. I haven't had one for a while now because I've just, you know, I've not really pushed that. It was fun, but I don't know. It's not me. It's like, you know, yeah. It's like the difference between TV and radio.
Yeah.
You know, I've done a lot of TV, and I don't feel the same about TV as I do about being on the radio. And yeah, things like that are fun. And if having a certain recognisable notoriety help you with that, then great.
Perfect. We want to thank you so far for answering our
Not at all.
questions. But now we want to pass it out to the audience. So get ready, because we're bringing around a fishbowl. Right, first question.
What is the hardest topic you have to cover?
That's a good question. Hardest topics, again, big news stories. The death of Diana was a pretty tough thing to have to cover, but that's again a national, international news event. The hard things are when, you know, a mum and dad come in, as done from Coventry. They've lost their son due to some terrible, tragic illness or accident, but somehow they're able to turn their grief into something positive because they've set up a foundation that funds X, Y, and Z. So, for example, there's something in Coventry called the Our J Foundation, OURJAY. This is a mum called Naomi who lost her son because he had a cardiac arrest. Had there been a defibrillator nearby, her 18-year-old son would still be alive today. Okay, that was 2 years ago. In the 2 years since her son's death, you'd imagine she'd have spent a bit of time grieving that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
She's managed to fund 140 defibrillators to go into places not far away from here and all up and down the UK. And that is comes back to, you know, when you hear her story and you hear how her son died, that's hard, and then you can pivot to something like that. Pretty, you know, I don't know, takes my breath away.
Yeah,
Oh.
no,
Yeah.
of course.
How is radio different to other mediums of technology?
It's a good question. Radio is different and the same. Sorry, I'm going to straddle both answers there. It's the same in that it has to modernise, you know.
Yeah.
It is not simply AM, FM signals anymore. It's digital, it's online. You've got podcast audio now, which is growing, which means live streaming radio in the same way you'll get with TV, linear TV. Who in this room, you know, watching this right now, listen, you know, puts BBC One on at 7 o'clock and flicks to ITV at 7:30 for Coronation Street and flicks back at 8 o'clock for EastEnders? I'd imagine very few of you, okay? And in the same way, radio will have to adapt to that. So all of our programmes now live online, so you can dip back and listen into them again in your own time. In the same way that streaming services like the BBC iPlayer, ITVX, 4 On Demand, etc., this stuff will live as an archive and you get to choose when you listen or watch to it. Now that's only happened because of the pressure of other streaming services. Netflix, famously, of course, because the Netflix model has meant that all live streaming broadcasters have had to look again at what they do, and that will evolve again, you know, for sure in the next sort of few years or so. So radio's got to react, as every other media has. Audio, whether that is podcast live on the radio or living online on a sounds player, will also have to adapt for that. But then essentially, where it's the same, radio is a very intimate medium, okay? People don't listen in tens of thousands around the radio. You're not broadcasting to a stadium, right? You're usually broadcasting to one person at home, in the car, in the kitchen, and remembering that and referring to the audience as you. So you don't go, hello everyone, you go, good morning to you. Subtle, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you're directing your comment to one person, and the great broadcasters always remember to fold back to the fact it's one person you're broadcasting to all the time. And that, I would say, will be what remains the same on radio, however other many platforms come along between now and whenever.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. We have maybe one last question.
Yes, so how have you dealt with the competition that you have dealt with over the years?
Yeah. It's increased. It's got a lot more. It's got a lot tougher. When I started on BRMB in the 1980s, BRMB was the only local radio station in Birmingham, and it owned the marketplace. 50% reach. 1 in every 2 radios. Half the audience were listening to it. Had an incredible imprint. Now, you know, there's a plethora of services. There's DAB services. There's online services. And the answer I'd always come up with this is the cream rises to the top. Okay, if it's good enough, it'll find a way to cut through. So having a standard in what you do, oh, that'll do, is never something that comes up in conversation. Okay, oh, that'll be all right. We'll just put it on. Won't do. Keeping a standard and knowing what your standards are, you know, knowing what you'll allow and not allow to get on air is very important. You know, I mean, you'll be doing some stuff now, and if you're not happy with it, if it's not meeting up to your standard, you should speak up and say so. And go, no, we can't put that out, guys. Surely we can do better than this. And if you feel like that, the chances are, you know, you can. And trust me, over time, if you build up a body of quality work, it will cut through.
Perfect.
So we want to thank you for our audience for such amazing question. And for the next person of the show, we will briefly talk about some photos you.
I'm very nervous now. Oh, here we go.
Is your morning hosting?
Yeah. That's the morning we announced the Queen had passed away,
Wow.
which is why that photo is done in black and white. I'm in black, even though we're not in vision, but that was the morning after, yeah.
So you
Ah.
are teaching.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, a byproduct of what I do is you get asked to host and present award ceremonies, and this was an award ceremony in Kenilworth for something called the Worthy Awards, which is their community awards event, and every year they host this. So you get asked to host and MC, compare some of these. So so that's what that one's all about.
Okay,
Lovely.
so
Yeah.
another experience, another photos maybe. This one is for your
Yes.
daily show.
So this is the BBC's, branding for the breakfast show. So I'm trying not to look at me because that looks ever so smarmy. But yeah, so the BBC will have a set branding font, set colours.
So they choose everything
Yeah.
for you.
Okay,
Nice.
because you think I'd have chosen that?
Oh, it was really lovely to have you here today.
Not at
Phil.
all, thank you.
So we've learned a lot from your experience, and it was really interesting, and it was really an insight from the industry. So it was really wonderful, and the Social Butterfly team was really glad to have you.
Yes.
Thank
it
you for
was an
asking
honour.
me. And anytime.
Perfect. And we want to say a big thank you to our audience members today and everyone watching at home. We hope you have learned so much today, but if anything, if you haven't, please follow our social medias, like our posts, where you get to see the behind the scenes and get to meet our next guest. Thank you again.
Thank you.